Hi everyone, welcome to Tidy TV, where I bring the classroom to you. I'm Hannah John, and today I'm going to talk about the first part in a two-part series that looks at how to defend your PhD thesis. Stay tuned. So in today's video, what I want to talk about is what is the defense? And then what you can do to prepare for the defense before the actual defense date. So I don't think there's an event in the life of a PhD student that evokes as much fear as the PhD thesis defense. So hopefully what I can do in the next couple of weeks is to assuage any fears or worries that you might have about the thesis defense, demystify the process, and try to get you as prepared as possible in conjunction with your committee to have a successful thesis defense. So what is the thesis defense? The thesis defense gives you the chance to defend your research. You're going to be introducing your research topic, your findings, and you're going to defend the rigor of this research to a committee of scholars. So your job is to convince the committee that you are a capable, independent scholar who can contribute to the academic field. A side note that I want to add here, as you're preparing for the PhD thesis defense, is that your mindset should be shifting from that of a student, so one taking classes and one receiving evaluations, to that of a peer. We are treating you as future colleagues, and so we expect you to be prepared and ready to defend your research. This is something that other professors, other scholars expect of one another, and so we're placing that same expectation on you. So there are two major components to the PhD thesis defense. The first is having your written thesis, and the second part is having an oral defense of your findings. In this two-part series, I'm going to be focusing on the oral defense of your findings. Now, before we actually go on to preparing before the thesis defense, I do want to give a word of encouragement, and that is the thesis defense is not meant to be a kind of 5-on-1 confrontational situation where you are trying to, shield yourself from blows from other scholars or professors. That's not actually meant to be the case. But we do want to make sure that you are able to talk about the rigor of your research, how that fits within the broader academic debate. Are the data and methods that you use rigorous? Do they make sense within the context of this research? And do you provide something new to the table? So with that in mind, let's talk about what you can do to prepare before the thesis defense. The most important message I'll be starting out with is you as a PhD student are primarily responsible for making sure that the thesis defense goes smoothly. Your thesis advisor or your academic advisor might be there to encourage you and to support you, and hopefully they're doing that very actively. But again, the onus of responsibility on graduating is yours. The two major things that you can do prior to the defense that will best set you up to have a successful defense is, first, making sure that you have met already the graduation requirements of your department before you have the defense. And the second is to make sure that you have a committee that is ideally positioned to help you along the defense process. Now, the graduation requirements for each university, each program might be very different. So again, please double check with your department about what the graduation requirements are. But at least in our department, before you can actually set the date for your thesis defense, you have to make sure that A, you've completed your coursework, B, you have passed the comprehensive exam, and C, you have published at least one journal article in a peer-reviewed academic journal at the SSCI, Scopus, or KCI levels. The department will actually not let you schedule a thesis defense if you have not completed all of these requirements, especially the publication requirement. I do have students who write their thesis as well as their planned publication concurrently, but I actually encourage all of my students to make sure that you get your publication out of the way, to make sure that you get published prior to really focusing on the thesis defense. So once you have made sure that you are actually qualified or ready to schedule a thesis defense, the second thing that I would do, and this would begin with your thesis writing, is to make sure that you have an ideal committee formed. Now, an ideal committee here is not a committee that's going to pass you easily. And actually, you do want a committee that's going to be asking you very, sharp, insightful questions that can only improve the quality of your research, and so having those committee members is actually crucial. But especially when it comes to your thesis advisor as well as to your committee chair, you do want those who will be able to give you timely feedback, who will be able to encourage you throughout the process of your thesis, and especially as you get into the thesis defense. When it comes to other committee members, you should check with your department and university about the requirements here, but at least in our program, you have at least one external reviewer. And what that means means is this is someone who is not part of our university. Now, normally there are one of two cases when it comes to finding an external member to be a committee member for your thesis committee. One is that the PhD student would reach out directly to someone from either another university or another research institution and ask that person to be a member of the thesis committee after you've received the okay from your thesis advisor. The second case is if the PhD student doesn't know a professor or someone outside of the university who can be a part of the committee. Oftentimes what I would do then is I would step in and I would recommend certain people to be part of the thesis committee. Now, in an ideal scenario, I would actually prefer the first case, when the student would reach out directly to an external member to be part of the thesis defense committee. And the reason for this is because the student already has a rapport with this person, and so there's less awkwardness or potential for awkwardness during the thesis committee defense. Side note here, please make sure that your thesis advisor is okay with your choice of an external reviewer, just to make sure that he or she would fit within the overall kind of chemistry of the thesis committee. Now, in the second case, this is what I do when there's absolutely no other alternative. So when there's no other choice, I would recommend someone who would fit well within the committee, but also who would be interested in this particular area of research. If this is actually the case, please make sure that you do sit down with him or her to be able to introduce your research and to answer any queries that he or she might have. So now that you have this committee, so you have your thesis advisor, you have your committee chair, as well as other committee members, both internal and external, what is your responsibility as a student when it comes to preparing for the thesis defense? Everything in terms of setting a date for the thesis defense, talking about progress with your thesis, especially when it comes to revising elements of your thesis, given feedback from your committee members. This should be taking place by you in consultation with your thesis advisor. And the more often that you can communicate with your thesis committee members, the better. The most important thing that you can do prior to your actual thesis defense is to make sure that your committee members are not surprised by what they actually see on defense day. This means they should be very familiar with your research question, how this fits within the academic debate, what are your major data and methods that you're using to answer your research question, and what are your key findings and key contribution. Again, this should not be a surprise to the committee members, and if it is, you've done something wrong. This means that you probably didn't communicate often or effectively enough with your committee members. And again, the onus of responsibility for the thesis defense and passing the thesis defense is on you. Please make sure that you're communicating properly with your committee members. Now, if I could provide some additional tips that could help you prior to your thesis defense to help you prepare even better, and this is for those who are already just about to start your thesis defense, but also to those who are in the early stages of the PhD program, this would be to focus on A, publishing more, and B, participating in academic conferences. Now, I already mentioned before the two major components of the thesis defense is the written thesis itself, and the second part is the oral defense of the thesis. When you submit your papers for review at peer-reviewed academic journals, they are treating you like peers. And again, this is what is happening during the thesis defense. Your committee members are treating you like a peer, a scholar within this field. So as you are publishing more, or as you participate in the publication process more, you receive a lot of helpful, sharp feedback from other scholars within the field. And so these are some of the questions that you might be anticipating when it comes to your thesis defense. Again, the publication process can help hone your research skills, make your writing even clearer, and this can only help as you're preparing the written portion of your thesis as you're preparing for the defense. Presenting at academic conferences will definitely help with the second part, which is the oral defense of your thesis. And in fact, when you go to academic conferences, this is what happens. You're presenting about your research, why you engaged in this research, what is the research question, how this fits within the broader academic debate, what are your data and methods and key findings. And so it gives you a lot of extra additional practice that you're going to be doing on the thesis day. So the more practice you can get in this realm, the better prepared I think you'll be. You'll also be getting questions from the audience, from your peers. And again, this would help you prepare for the thesis defense because in a way it kind of mimics this process, presenting your findings and then being able to field questions in an effective way from your peers. So I hope you have a better idea about what the thesis defense is and what you can do practically to help prepare yourself for the thesis defense date. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about the actual thesis defense itself, so D-Day, and what you can do to prepare for D-Day, as well as what happens after the thesis defense. And so, yes, I'm very excited. And you should be too. Please don't be nervous. Please don't panic. And until next time, here on Tidy TV, bye!